Just want to thank the staff for serving us such a great lunch and hope you all enjoyed. We are ready for some more deep discussions about creating partnerships in mining regions. But before I introduce Karen Rastool, I really need the room to pay attention and stop talking, please. And I feel so bossy. But it's a really important topic, and we want to hear from our panelists and hear the important perspectives that they have. So, Karen, I'm going to turn it over to you to introduce our panelists today. You got it.
Good afternoon, everyone. We have the pleasure of being the post-lunch act and to keep you out of your carb slumber. So I hope lunch was great. I'm Karen Rastool. I'm from Doki's First Nation. I'm also from this territory. I heard from folks this morning who also mentioned being in Robinson Huron Treaty, and it's always fun to be home. We're talking about mining today, but there's also another thread in the room. And this may not surprise some of you, but it's hockey. There's a lot of families and people here who have played hockey with my brothers, with my dad. Turns out Courage coached hockey with my dad for the National Aboriginal Hockey Championship. So don't be afraid to get competitive out there and butt heads with folks who may not be aligned with your home team. All right, I'm going to invite the speakers to join the stage. You can go ahead. Yeah. And I do things a little differently. I find I'm quite uncomfortable introducing people for them. Where I'm from, the protocol is that you have the opportunity to share who you are and where you're from with the room. And so true to Anishinaabe protocol, I'll call on Doris to get us started with the self-introduction.
As an engineer traveling around the world leading company operations, I have witnessed the contrast of wealth and extreme poverty in resource-rich regions that fuel my passion for geoscience and human transformation and led me to develop Designing Sustainable Prosperity, a method, a process to achieve sustainability and development, both crucial for the future.
Thank you so much. Courage?
My name is Courage Bear. I'm from the Ojapways First Nation in Saskatchewan. I work for BHP, which is a global mining company. And I am always taught to introduce my traditional name is Masqua Pipikwan, which translates to bear whistle. So that's who I am.
Welcome.
James Trail, CEO of the Shire of Coolgardie, a small little local government in Western Australia. So I think the Mayor of Karratha was talking about 30 hours. I think my trip was 38, 39 hours. So, but I came a couple of days early. So looking forward to hopefully adding some insight on the panel. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mark Prostupa. I'm of English and Ukrainian ancestry. I grew up in Winnipeg, so I still cheer for the Winnipeg Jets. I've lived in a variety of different places. This is my second time living in Calgary after moving here to take a position with Valley Base Metals about a year ago.
So a warm round of applause for our speakers, please. So today we're here to explore a very popular or unpopular topic, depending on who you are and where you come from. We're here to talk about ESG. Specifically, we're going to share some ESG practices and how it intersects with Indigenous ideology, protocol, and practices. And beyond this theoretical exercise, our speakers here are also going to share with us some practicalities, some tangible examples of how ESG is intersecting with Indigenous worldviews on the ground in Canada and beyond. A few themes to expect: how industry and First Nations can better coordinate their efforts, how we measure results for this work, in addition to challenges faced on this front, and what practical steps we can take to ensure that these collaborations are effective and delivering real results. Just a sense of how we're going to spend the next, 50 minutes together at this point. Each speaker is going to take 7 minutes to share with you a message that they wish to leave with you. And while they're talking, you have a job to do. You're listening, you're engaging on Slido, you're sending in your questions, because the second half is going to focus on discussion. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm a fan of the Socratic method. I see some familiar faces and some really smart people in the room. Don't be surprised if I call on you in the discussion and dialogue session. So all the more reason to fight that carb coma and stay awake. On that note, Doris, would you kick us off?
So since we have 7 minutes, I'll run, and please run with me. See who gets there first. In this slide, just want to show on the vertical axis economic activity of the region and the horizontal time. The red curve represents mining. So as mining in the operation stage, there is capacity, there's people coming in, and therefore the economy increases. But as the resources deplete, all ends. People leave the jobs, leave the region, and all ends. The yellow curve is represented by all the service industry that follows the mining to support and follows the same trend. There is a peak there because of construction, and therefore drops when construction is finished, carry through operations, but their legacy never ends. Which mining company has a plan for 500 years for the legacy? But what we aim is the green curve. The green curve represents the sustainable prosperity. And it's an ecosystem solution designed during the boom of the mining. So the big shift here is the mining becomes an enabler for regional prosperity, and regional prosperity becomes the priority, and mining enabler catalyst, and therefore moves from maybe have a negative image into being welcome, because if they were not there, you could not build a regional prosperity. Let me keep moving here. So just share briefly a case study, perhaps a little bit similar to Sudbury. So this is Peru. Next, please. This region economy depends nearly 100% on copper. So copper mines and copper smelters. They have shortage of water, and they have the best irradiation potential on Earth, and therefore huge potential for solar energy. But they have unique skills. They know how to make things work, but especially make work complex thermal processes. So one solution for them to solve the problem of water, because if you don't have water and energy, nothing can be done. So it's to really adopt a new technology that is a thermal process of direct desalination of water with solar energy, a big kettle, as you can see, a big dome heated by the sun, and then boil the water, distill, separate the water from the brine, combine with the advanced crystallization process to recover all the salts from the brine, but also they have good geothermal, combined with geothermal so that you run all day around your energy supply. And therefore, next, then this is the system solution. So enabled by the mine and smelter on top, solve the water issue, the blue there, and then the energy, and open the door to smart agriculture. So not just fresh produce, but value-added products, because the soil is fertile, it just needs water. So just to give you an idea. Okay. I think there was something before. Okay, then this one is okay. Okay. So we use geoscience to unearth the hidden potential of the region. And here is just a little example of how you can use the subsurface potential to figure out new sources of water, new sources of energy, even storage capacity, even soil quality. So use geoscience for decisions above ground. I advocate for the use of geoscience for all decisions in society. We really should know where we stand on in order to figure out what's possible above ground. So science-based. And then the next one, please. So just look at Sudbury. This is I guess everybody knows here how Sudbury was, the Earth was formed in Sudbury, a meteorite. And then you have all this nickel. The next slide, please. So I just wanted to visualize the method for you. So I spent all Saturday painting this for you. Because I'm not a painter. I had a flow chart, a dry flow chart, but I said, I can't do this for them. So I painted this for you. So the inputs are really hidden natural resource potential, the geoscience, all these possibilities that exist lie beneath our feet. First, the same for natural resources and the same for human, the innate genius of every individual. So that's the inputs, but also market study, but I didn't draw the market study. So just the hidden natural resources, human potential, and then you see the trunk of the tree is where the design occurs. But before designing a system solution, we have to change the way we think, because we don't think in systems. We are a silo world, and therefore, you see they get two twists. One, to change the way we think about ourselves and the teams, and second, about the region where we live. And then create a thriving, a vibrant future for the region, all united, for example, in Sudbury. I did this for Sudbury, that's why the ball was the meteorite. So for the design, we use the 7 steps. We're using the method of expanding awareness of possibilities. Because if we go into a workshop all together here now, without preparing ourselves to think differently, we'll come up with obvious solutions. So the first step is to think differently about ourselves and the team. So break those limitations. And the second step is to do the same for the region. In many cases, nothing can be done in this region. Therefore, again, think differently about the region, because we are aiming for solutions beyond our reference points. We have to do things differently to create a different future. We keep doing the same thing over and over again and expect different results. We really need to, I think that's absolutely key to create a bright future. Then only on the third step, we review all these integrated natural resource models, the inputs I shared early on. And then only once you have been exhausted with ideas, and when the juicy ideas are ready, you can only start co-creating the future for the region. Because we need truly innovative ideas to tackle the challenge we are living today, such as climate change and so on. And most of the solutions are solutions to tackle climate change or nature positive solutions, because these are the markets of the future. Once you know what's possible, then you adapt the education system to provide the skills and tools to support that evolving economy. And then create the environment to sustain the environment and live at the ever edge of creative possibility. So just wanted to capture how DSP is designing sustainable prosperity, but just short word because a mouthful the whole thing. How it satisfies indigenous needs. Regional prosperity is the priority. Mining is the second priority because its enabler is temporary. And if there was no mine, there was no chance to create the sustainable prosperity. And then the focus is a social well-being economy. Indigenous knowledge, the depth of the indigenous wisdom, the past, the victory stories I use in order to figure out what's the latent, innate genius of every human being in the region in order to co-create the future from the position of greatness. And of course, we satisfy environmental sustainability, preserve the culture, which absolutely need to create the future, is through collaboration, because key players co-create the future, all from the position of strength, and then education is adapted to provide the skills and tools to support the evolving economy. And we measure and prioritize the business case with United Nations Sustainable Goals indicators. We're doing quite a bit of research to evaluate projects, to evaluate the impact in the region and global. So I shared with you beyond ESG. So it's more proactive. There's nothing wrong with ESG, but here we just wanted to share the regional prosperity is the target, the priority, and cover the whole system. So therefore, we can have a holistic approach of this full ecosystem. So I just wanted to leave, the world is in our hands. It's up to us to make it brighter, and the time to do is now. And also I published a book on this method. Welcome to look at it, make it better. It's for all of us. Thank you. Did I do it in 7 minutes?
Thanks. I guess I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge the two host communities at the territory we're in. Also, the elder this morning for walking us through. If I'm being totally honest, I woke up this morning. I said, "Boy, it would be great to have a smudge and clear my mind because I got to go present in a few hours." And but I thought I better not bring my sweetgrass because they'll take it at the airport. So, but yeah, but it was nice exercise to walk us through and put us in the right frame of mind. So I appreciate the elder doing that as well as the singer. So, again, Courage Bear from BHP. I'm the manager of Indigenous engagement. Really going to talk about, globally our company and who we are, and our purpose statement is up there. But I'm going to try to talk about in a practical sense what we do on the ground at Jansen. So for those of you that aren't familiar, we're developing a potash mine in the middle of Canada, I say, and just near Saskatoon. So about 130 kilometers east of Saskatoon. It's been an ongoing process. I've been with the company almost 13 years, so I think our engagement started back in 2010. So if you're talking about working in ESG and developing relationships, it's the time and the commitment that it takes. It doesn't happen overnight. And then it just talks a little bit about our goals and our ambitions in working with Indigenous folks. This slide really highlights kind of our approach when we're speaking about ESG and how we tackle it. We have social value pillars. Obviously, you see in there's Indigenous partnership is a critical one, which guides, excuse me, how we go about, and we have goals set around these pillars for 2030. So the next one you see, our approach, that's our updated, in 2022, we updated our Indigenous Peoples Policy Statement. And that was an exercise that took what happened globally through Australia, Canada, and our other assets in South America, where we engaged, got feedback from Indigenous communities, and what does a policy look like? And we landed on, we heard Don speak about it, is Indigenous people don't view themselves as stakeholders, they're rights holders. So part of that policy is it's a rights-based approach. And we talk about that, and what does that mean in the policy? You can find that on our website. These are all publicly available. Again, the keys out of the updated policies, incorporating Indigenous perspectives, so giving voice and listening. And then we talk about meaningful. It's not just having the conversations, walking away from the table and not doing anything about it. It's putting it into practice. The co-design, engagement. And then we talk about FPIC. We understand that FPIC is an important process to safeguard the collective rights of Indigenous people. And how do we go about that? We're developing templates. We're developing things where we work through with community strategies to implement it and make sure we can get to that point. And then, of course, the intellectual property and data sovereignty. These are all critical parts of our approach to ESG. And then the final one is in August this year, we just launched, we call it a Canada Indigenous Partnerships Plan. Some would call it a reconciliation action plan. One of the things we found as we went through this exercise is the people in the community who we were dealing with and working with the Indigenous community, they didn't want us to call it the Reconciliation Action Plan. We have a Reconciliation Action Plan for our Australian assets. As we engaged and got feedback, and they provided their input and their values, that was the feedback, is that they wanted to see it called an partnerships plan. It focused on partnerships. And we engaged companies across country, organizations, and then a bunch of the local communities and other institutions in the province. So it's an exercise that we talk about, that co-design, and how do we implement and how do you actually put it into action. Is that document final? No. It's a document that's we believe it's a living document, and it's the first draft of what we see probably being updated. So it really, those three documents kind of guide our approach. When you're talking about environment, we're going to work with environment, the social, and the governance. Those are all pieces that help foster kind of our approach with Jansen. We've got developing a potash plan, like I said. We started in 2010 with, again, beginning the engagement before the permitting process, and it's evolved into where now we have 6 agreements with 6 different First Nations, and they're participating in the project economically and just from an advisory standpoint, for whether it's elders participating or whatnot. But again, if you're speaking about ESG, and you talk about what does it mean, and there's this emerging kind of trend of putting the I in the ESG, and the approach that it's got to be weaved. I think it has to be weaved throughout all components of ESG. And if you don't have Indigenous values at the forefront, then it limits your probability of success. I think it's been demonstrated enough. The more you can incorporate Indigenous thought, Indigenous values, knowledge into your processes, into how you go about business, the rewards can be great. And I think that's been our approach, and I think we've had success specifically with Jansen and the potash project. Is again, we're able to develop good relationships and work with communities in an open way. And so I think having their knowledge, having their input into the development of whether it's these documents or our procurement strategy and those types of things, where we can empower them to participate in the economics of the project. Again, when you think of ESG, we talk about not just being compliant with the standards and those types of things, because it's easy when you get into relationships that you can develop a checklist and say, well, we're compliant, we're good. But one of the things we found through our engagement with with the development of our Indigenous Partnerships Plan is communities, they want to be part of it. They want to share their knowledge, and they want to participate. But they want everything done in a responsible way. They want to make sure environment's looked after. They want to make sure that we're taking care of community, and we hopefully leave it a better place, or we can enhance in making it a better place. Again, there's obviously, you could look at the financial benefits to companies when you do it right. But it has to go more than just the financial. And that's what we heard through our engagements is, as much as there's potential for a growing economy for the nations, is it can't be just about the money. And it has to be, they centered us back on everything we do in this space. It's centered around our relationship, and how do we engage with each other, and how do we respect each other's values. So I think that was, a key takeaway for us as we developed the plan. It's always about relationships. When you look at this picture, there's five of the 6 chiefs there. It was an announcement for a couple of large contracts, site services and I believe camp operations and maintenance. So the other one is you might see JP Gladue, who he's in that photo. I think sits on our Corporate Social Responsibility Committee. This was at one of the nations where we work with them again collaboratively, that when you work together, you allow them, they built a wellness center that again incorporates traditional modalities of healing for families. So those are the types of things where I think you can see benefit and you work together on it. And it's about weaving kind of that Indigenous perspective throughout all components of ESG, that it's not, and but you can also take an approach that it's one size fits all. Like it doesn't, what's worked at Jansen in Saskatchewan, if we were to develop someplace else, we'd have to understand that local region. And I think that's so important that you can't apply a one size fits all. And I guess, that's a brief summary of what we've done. I think what I'll leave you with is like, I mean, when you're operating near Indigenous people's lands, there's a tremendous amount of responsibility. But what also comes with that is a tremendous amount of opportunity. And if you do it right and you're respectful and you're willing to incorporate their values, their knowledge into some of your processes, no matter how big or large you are as a company, then you talk about the financial benefits and the certainty for projects. It goes a long ways because they want certainty and we want certainty. So I'll leave with that there's a tremendous amount of opportunity in this space, and but it takes work. It doesn't just, you don't just show up and say, okay, we're gonna do this. It takes work and it takes sometimes years, and again, you gotta be patient and but it's truly worthwhile work, I'd say. So I'll leave with that and wait for any questions.
Hi, everyone. I know it was Daniel, when he was speaking on the panel today, coming 30 hours, and James just mentioned he beat that at 38 hours. I had a 5-minute walk this morning. So I guess I can't use that as an excuse. I am a bit of a pinch hitter, though, because I am replacing Tara Shea, who works for the Mining Association of Canada. And unfortunately, she wasn't able to make it. So I'm a last-minute substitution, so we'll see how I do. Perfect. So I'm going to talk about ESG and a framework that the Mining Association of Canada uses. So in 2004, or before that, there was a decision to develop sort of a framework to improve mining overall. There was a view that mining did need to improve on a variety of different, in a variety of different areas. So they wanted to develop a standard that different companies would be able to buy in and would be able to further progress. This standard originally just started in Canada, but now it's a global mining standard. So there are 13 different countries that have adopted this framework, and it represents over 200 companies. So it's pretty widely adopted. And one of the things that's important is that if you're a member of the Mining Association of Canada, you have to do it. So I know at Valley Base Metals, where I work, we do it for all our facilities. Part of the requirements as well is to develop national community of interest panels so that they play a role in terms of the development of the standard and any updates that are happening. They also have a role in terms of the verification of the process. So that's really important. So the communities of interest are Indigenous peoples, other local businesses and communities that participate in it. So the Mining Association of Canada has a group of 15 people. And just a couple of months ago, they changed it where it was advisory to the Mining Association of Canada, and now it's a decision maker. So the community of interest has a decision-making responsibilities. As I mentioned, there are a variety of different areas that it covers. So the one that I'm most familiar on and worked on in terms of updating a few years ago was the Indigenous and community relationships. But you can see that it covers other areas of social as well as environmental areas of performance. Under each of the indicators, it gets more, under each of the pillars, it gets a little bit more complex because there's a number of different indicators as well. So you can see that it's broken down into different areas of performance that you measure against. In terms of the verification process, because I think that that's really what a lot of people want to see, is that there is actual improvement, and what's happening is what's being stated is actually what's happening. So there is a verification process every third year. The other 2 years is the self-assessment process. So there is a role for evaluators to go out, for notification of communities, interviews with them to make sure that you are living up and you are correctly assessing where the performance level is. One of the things that I really like about these standards is that there's, for most of them, there's 5 different ratings, so that you can see what you need to do to improve in each area. I did talk about that one. So I think I'll end it there. That's a high-level overview of the framework that the Mining Association of Canada uses for environmental, social, and governance. You can go onto the website and you can check for each company the different levels of ratings that are provided for each area of these protocols. So thanks, and look forward to any questions. If you ask me any questions, ask me about the Indigenous and Community Relations Protocol, because that's what I know about.
Afternoon, everybody. I hope everybody enjoyed their lunch. So I'd just like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land in which I'm standing on today presenting, as I do in local government and things with our First Nations people, and acknowledge the elders past, present and emerging. So ESG, really interesting, very interesting concept. So I'm a bean counter by trade, so don't hold that against me. And as a CEO, dealing with the social aspect of the community, so I'm going to focus largely on the social fabric. Whoops, no. There should be. There we are. So the Shire of Coolgardie developed a ESG framework 4.5 years ago, and we've been working with the community in the mining sector in terms of what that means, and we live and breathe by that. And no disrespect to the mining sector, and I believe it's worldwide, and to many academics and things, is that I really don't believe that everybody truly understands what social fabric's all about. And it's really difficult to define, and it's a thing that's left probably untapped. And I'm going to finish with something, and I was very privileged yesterday to be part of a group talking about things, and I learned a lot about your structures and what happens here, and we have a very different framework and structure in Australia, but there's many similarities. So we're a small place, 3,600 people. We cover 30,400 square kilometres, so it's a fair space, and we contribute $6 billion to the economic output of the state. So after the Pilbara and our friends from Karratha and things, we're the 4th biggest local government contributing to economic GDP in the state. So we certainly bat above our weight, and it's interesting. Our pillars: social, growing well, building trust, evening up access, and I think it's interesting around the whole aspect of building trust and collaboration. So we developed a collaboration strategy, and the heart of that and the core of that is the community, and a significant component of that is our First Nations community, and I'll touch on very briefly in a minute the example we've got. But what was really interesting yesterday was we've built it on the back of focusing on collaboration, building capacity, seeking consent from our First Nations people, which has resulted in better informed decision making, but that's been built on trust, and it's taken a long time. It's taken 4 to 5 years. So we have these mining companies that are listed up there. Some of them you may be aware of, some you may not. So they've built significant assets, gold, nickel, lithium, and operate in our community. And work very closely. And the model, briefly, the model we have is that the local community is our local community, truly a local community with our First Nations people. And one of our elders sits on our local council. And believe it or not, and she has done it, she's trained a bean counter around what social fabric really means. And she taught me a valuable lesson. And she sat me down one day and she said, James, and then this. Now that's pretty hard for me because I like having a chat, but listening, seeing, feeling, and then talking. And I've been very privileged to spend a lot of time with her and learned a lot about the culture of our First Nations community. Look, I'll leave it there just in terms of what it is, but we've built a collaboration. We've got a great focus on social fabric, and I'm going to leave you all with a very, very interesting challenge that the world faces, Canada faces, Australia faces. Everybody talks about critical minerals, okay? As many of you would know in this room, and I'm probably going to do just justice, but I think, was it Mary Lou Campbell? Mary Lou Campbell that was at a meet. Jenny, sorry, apologies, Jenny, but she resonated with something to me she said about the environment, and she's right. And you just take the thing with critical minerals. Everybody's emphasising critical minerals, pushing critical minerals, building about the economic and financial value. For every 1 tonne of critical minerals that's sellable, you produce 7 tonnes of waste that needs to be disposed of. 7 tonnes. What you also need is massive, massive, massive supplies of water. So the impact the world's going to face, you're going to face it, we're going to face it, and everybody's going to face it, is the massive environmental impact challenge that critical minerals is going to present to the world. And what's interesting about that, maybe it provides an opportunity for our communities and particularly our First Nations communities. Thank you.
All right, I think you guys did a good job at keeping it somewhat contained. I don't see any questions coming through, so I'll kick us off with a spicy one. The elephant in the room is that there's been backlash to ESG policy and regulation. This isn't a secret. I bet most of the room is following this trend quite closely. And so when we look at, it started out in Europe, folks started talking about it last year. With the upcoming election in the US, there's a lot of chatter south of the border about scaling back on ESG regulation. We're having a conversation, folks traveled around the world to talk about ESG and the importance of sustainability and incorporating Indigenous ideology within everyday business. So within that context, and they have no warning, what would your argument be in light of the impending backlash on ESG? Doris, you look like you have a good answer.
Hello. So the backlash. I think, as you have heard, I presented beyond ESG rather than, it's really good that ESG is pushing responsibly mining. If I ask any of you to define ESG, how many will say, I'll get 10 responses? Raise your hands. Okay, how many will raise your hands that will get 20 answers? Or 100 answers? Because we all define differently. It's nothing wrong with it, it's good, but how do we do it? And leads to criticism, to how everybody's reporting and so on. So it's nothing wrong with that, but I believe we have to have a more proactive approach to it and go beyond comply and rather, my point is, create an ecosystem that includes water, infrastructure, energy, and so on to figure out the future of each region. And then every project ever after follows those foundations of sustainability as part of an ecosystem so that nobody can go astray because they will destabilize the system. So that's really.
So for a bit of context, I work at a place called Crust Use Strategy. We care about public opinion, what the government thinks, what it doesn't think, what soon to be in position governments stand for. And we recently ran a survey, and you'll find this interesting, found that 45% of Canadians felt corporations have drifted away from their core role of creating jobs and driving results for shareholders and want to see action taken to prevent corporations from focusing on policies such as DEI and ESG. So in light of that, any takers, any sentiments or thoughts to add to the tough nut that I just put to you? Anybody in the room want to have something to share? Question, comment? Oh, there we go. It's because they turned the screen. Yeah. All right, how do communities manage the misalignment of local ESG principles with those espoused by local mining companies? Who wants to take that one?
Whoops. Okay, I'll have a crack at that one. Very, very interesting and things, and certainly mining companies. I mean, let's face it, or certainly I just talk from Australian experience. Most mining companies are driven by shareholders and profits. Okay, so at the end of the day, they're going to do whatever they can in terms of trying to make as much money as they can, and we've experienced that in Australia with the drop of lithium prices and nickel prices. So what happens is the S in ESG becomes the last thing they focus on. So a personal view that I have, until ESG initiatives and things are driven at a financial marketplace and companies are required to meet standards, which includes a focus on the social impacts on the community and them having to demonstrate in annual returns how much of their contributions are going into the social fabric of communities, I believe there's a challenge and a misalignment. All of a sudden now the price of lithium and things has gone up again. Mining companies are coming to see us and say, how much money do you want? That's a personal view, but also seen it in action.
Very good, thank you. Courage, there's one question for you. Can you highlight some of the Indigenous values that you have incorporated into your processes that have helped increase alignment? So some examples.
I think, I mean, just last week we were launching a Potash Academy, and we hosted a number of potential candidates to come and interview and whatnot. And you know, as we engage the community on how do we run these sessions, how do we make sure that the Indigenous participants coming through the doors that are going to potentially work for us are going to feel welcome, they're going to feel valued. And the feedback we got is, can we utilize elders? Can we create a place that, you know, because some of the folks they come with humility, I guess. So it's from an Indigenous perspective, that humility is you don't always be boastful or you try to go about your business. So how do we allow those participants to still showcase their abilities and not judge on what they really have? And so I think utilizing, that's just a small example that I can think off the top of my head recently. But also, you know, we often, when we worked with the communities and did our agreements, they asked to bring ceremony into that. And so for us, making sure as a company that our people understand what that means, you know, we're not just sitting down to do that. So I think trying to incorporate some of those values of how do you bring that part into, whether it's prayer or in our case, a pipe ceremony. So those are just a couple off the top, but if I thought probably more, I could spout out a few. So
Yeah. So open for discussion with Courage later on. So track them down, whoever's the one who tabled this question. In regions with various companies, how can different ESG strategies be coordinated to get some scalability of projects?
Are you looking at me, Karen?
Any taker.
Okay.
Go ahead, Mark.
So yeah, there are areas that are clusters of mining and so on. So I think that there's an opportunity for alignment on things like the Mining Association of Canada's towards sustainable mining framework that provides sort of a framework for all the companies. But I also think that there's opportunities for companies to work together, listening to local Indigenous communities and non-Indigenous communities to find out what their values are and what they want to focus on, and try and find ways that you can work together on those items.
So less worried about a cookie cutter approach and more curtailed to the partner in which you're engaging with.
Yeah, which turns to the thing that I know about, which is the Mining Association of Canada's Indigenous and Community Relations Protocol. Because an earlier version was like, hey, are you out there creating jobs, or are you out there creating business opportunities? A lot of what's in the protocol now says, how are you working together to identify common priorities and work on them together? And if you're doing that, you're hitting the top rating.
All right, we
Can
have.
I add one more
go
thing?
ahead, yeah.
You could also consider the UN SDG indicators on top of it to prioritize projects, regional, global. So you add a layer to it if there are different ESG strategies.
Very good. So we have, it looks like 90 seconds left in our time together. I did promise the panelists that we would do a somewhat of a rapid round closing thoughts to share with the room. So we'll start over you with Mark. We'll work our way over to Doris.
Maybe I'll turn over to your spicy question about ESG. I think everybody wants good performance from companies, and I wouldn't worry too much about the debate about ESG, is it good or it's bad. Companies should just be focused on trying to do a good job.
Love it.
I suppose the message to leave with is make sure we focus on the social fabric of our communities and how critical that is in terms of what we need to do, and that they need to be at the table right up front and right at the start of the process.
Probably a little what I said earlier. I think you don't underestimate the time and resources that it takes to put it into action, because it can be just words, and it takes a considerable amount of work, commitment from the company, whether that's resources or people committing to it to drive it. So I think just don't underestimate the time and effort, and trust the process and work with the communities.
I believe we can achieve sustainability and development, but we need to move from discussion into action. But we need to think differently to act differently. Thank you.
What a great note to end on. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge this afternoon.